Welcome to this installment of our Future Driven Forum. Auto Innovators is pleased to work with its thought leadership partner, Harman.
With more vehicles on the road today than ever before, safety on the road and getting places efficiently has become top priority. The emerging commercialization of vehicle-to-everything, or V2X technology, will help to make mobility safer and smarter, paving the way for autonomous driving. It enables every road user to be situationally aware of what is happening around them in real time. This includes interactions between vehicles, signal lights, and pedestrians. To enable a smart city environment, it is essential for vehicles on the road to be equipped with a V2X communication module and the supporting V2X software stack. Harman supplies this today through its telematics control units, smart antenna, and Harman Savari MobiWave product offerings. The next element in the system is the roadside unit, or RSU, which can be installed on street poles or within wireless communications infrastructure, like small cells, where they collect and process data about traffic safety and efficiency. The RSU serves as a way to share vital, real-time location information across devices like vehicles and pedestrians' mobile phones. Harman supplies RSUs today through its Harman Savari StreetWave product offering. To accurately convert the large amounts of V2X data coming from vehicles, roadside units, and pedestrians into actionable real-time alerts across a wide area, Harman offers multi-access edge computing (MEC) software called Harman Savari MechWave. It supports situations where ultra-low latency and high bandwidth are needed. Through its Digital Transformation Solutions division, Harman provides extensive application development and managed services to support smart city infrastructure networks. Harman's robust portfolio of smart city infrastructure products can transform any city into a smart city, opening the door for a vast array of services and applications that mobility users and pedestrians can benefit from by making their daily lives and commutes safer and more efficient.
Please welcome our host, John Bozzella, the President and CEO of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation.
Welcome to the Future Driven Forum. Nations around the world are racing to develop next-generation automotive technologies that can make transportation cleaner, safer, and smarter. One of those technologies is the subject of our forum today, vehicle-to-everything, or V2X communication. Today's cars and trucks are routinely equipped with touchscreens, navigation, emergency warning systems, and other features that are enabled by connectivity. But V2X, a particularly promising connected vehicle technology that allows vehicles to communicate in real time directly with each other, with roadway infrastructure, and even with pedestrians to save lives and make transportation more efficient, has not yet been fully realized in the United States. That said, governments at all levels are looking to leverage V2X technology to achieve their safety and efficiency goals. And the private sector is investing heavily in the development of V2X. That's great news. But to fully unlock the potential of this technology, we also need a regulatory and policy environment that supports and facilitates V2X adoption and use. We're joined today by some incredibly knowledgeable people in this area. They hold key positions in the federal and state governments and are joining us today to share their insights regarding the opportunities with V2X. Today, we'll discuss the benefits of V2X, where we are with getting this technology onto our roadways, and what more can and should be done in the policy space to realize the safety and efficiency benefits of V2X in the United States as soon as possible. This morning, and in conjunction with today's Future Driven Forum, the Alliance for Automotive Innovation released a new policy agenda on V2X. We outline the promising use cases for the technology, the regulatory uncertainty that has challenged wide-scale deployment in this country, and 10 concrete policy recommendations to assist federal and state agencies in accelerating the use of this game-changing technology on America's roads. You can find that document at www.autosinnovate.org/V2X. I hope you'll give it a look. With that, let's jump in and get started. My first guest is Michael Graham. Michael Graham is a member of the National Transportation Safety Board. which is an independent federal agency that investigates the causes and sources of every civilian aviation accident and significant accidents in other modes of transportation, including those that occur on our highways. He has had an extensive and distinguished career in aviation safety after serving as a naval aviator.
Thanks for having me.
You know, you recently released some really interesting and informative video interviews on V2X as part of NTSB's Most Wanted List interview video series. Take us through that a little bit, especially for those who may not have had a chance to see it. What did those videos reveal with regard to the opportunities for V2X technologies and what it might mean with regard to improving safety?
Well, I believe V2X is one of the most promising life-saving technologies available today. As an overview, V2X allows cars on the roads to communicate with each other and with roadway infrastructure such as traffic signals. When connected, vehicles talk to each other. They are transmitting data every 10 milliseconds, such as GPS location, acceleration, predicted path, and driver controls such as steering input and braking. The infrastructure can also transmit data to vehicles about an upcoming curve, speed limit, or road condition. With this amount of actionable and predictive data, applications can be developed to improve safety on our roadways. The most basic of safety applications may be an in-vehicle notification to a driver about an impending collision or do not pass warning when your car senses an oncoming vehicle that you as a driver may not be able to see. Advanced safety applications could include intersection movement assist, platooning, and integration with autonomous vehicle sensors. One NHTSA study estimates that V2X could address up to 80% of all crashes involving non-impaired drivers. This could save thousands of lives and prevent or mitigate millions of crashes every year.
It's when you talk about those numbers and those safety use cases, it really is a significant potential to save lives. But I want to sort of understand a little bit about what you said a minute ago about, for example, use cases associated with advanced safety systems, even automation. As most of the folks viewing this webinar know, vehicles are increasingly equipped with active safety systems that support the driving task. And so maybe you can explain why, if that's the case, do we also need V2X technology? What is the added safety benefit?
Good question. Let me be clear. The NTSB strongly supports sensor-based collision avoidance systems, but we also recognize that sensors, radar, and LiDAR have limitations such as line of sight, inclement weather, or unexpected profile of a vehicle. Unlike sensor-based systems, V2X technology allows vehicles to communicate directly with other vehicles through their onboard units. In 2015, one of the largest naturalistic V2X driving studies was conducted by Volpe as part of the safety pilot model deployment with approximately 2,800 V2X equipped vehicles. The intent of this deployment was to evaluate V2X technology in a real world driving environment. One remarkable finding from the study was that there was no missed forward collision warning alerts. Out of close to 400 rear-end crash scenarios observed, the V2X technology alerted the driver in all of them. More importantly, V2X is not intended to replace the current or future sensors on vehicles. Rather, we can merge onboard sensors with V2X technology to create redundancy and allow for greater confidence when an imminent crash protection scenario occurs.
Yeah, amazing. So we're talking about additional awareness and additional safety, and I do like the idea of redundancy. Especially redundancy. I think you mentioned, milliseconds. So very, very low latency, immediacy to this communications technology. Am I understanding that properly?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So in February of this year, in connection with an investigation into a crash involving multiple vehicles in Mount Pleasant Township, I think it was in Pennsylvania, the NTSB released findings and recommendations related specifically to V2X technology. What did the NTSB find during the crash investigation?
Yeah, the crash in Mount Pleasant demonstrated to the NTSB the limitations of collision avoidance systems and the importance of V2X technology. Now, let me set the scene of the crash for those that probably don't know it. It was January 5th, 2020, early morning, about 3:30 a.m. It was very dark out. It was on a descending mountainous curve with a 55-mile-an-hour advisory speed limit, and there was slight precipitation out. A motor coach entered the curve at 77 miles per hour and unfortunately lost control and overturned. It also came to rest perpendicular to the lanes of traffic and blocked the traffic lanes. After coming to rest, 3 tractor trucks and a passenger vehicle struck the overturned motor coach. One of the tractor drivers described the overturned motor coach as a black wall. All 3 tractor trucks were equipped with the collision avoidance system, including automatic emergency braking. The NTSB found, though, that the circumstances of the impact for each of the 3 trucks were likely outside the capabilities of the collision avoidance system on the vehicles. Many of the current limitations to onboard line of sight sensors were present in this crash, such as seeing around a curve, inclement weather, and an unexpected orientation of the overturned motor coach. Therefore, the NTSB found that the connected vehicle technology, if it had been installed on these vehicles involved in the crash, could have provided information to the drivers of the tractor trucks and the passenger vehicle, so the drivers could be alerted to the overturned motor coach.
Wow. So in other words, they could have stopped in advance rather than hitting this, as it was described, this black wall. So were there any specific recommendations that NTSB issued with regard to V2X as a result of this?
There were. The crash in Mount Pleasant was the first opportunity for the NTSB to directly address V2X issues in an accident report since the FCC's recent regulatory action. We took the opportunity to assess where we are post FCC action and how to chart a path toward widespread deployment of V2X technology. Accordingly, we focused on 2 problem areas: harmful interference from out-of-band emissions and regulatory uncertainty.
I want to unpack this issue of interference just to make sure that we understand it a little bit more. Why is harmful interference a concern here? Where does that concern come from, and what can be done to address it?
Crashes can happen very quickly. So to prevent crashes, the communication between vehicles and connected vehicles must be accurate and reliable. There is very little room for error. When harmful interference is introduced to that communication, the accuracy and the reliability is impaired. In the Mount Pleasant report, we found that recent regulatory action by the FCC allows for harmful interference from unlicensed devices and threatens the deployment of V2X technology. Therefore, we recommend that the FCC implement appropriate safeguards to protect V2X communication from that harmful interference.
Yeah, so at its basic form, you've got several actors in the spectrum at the same time, is what you're saying, right? So the spectrum that's arguably dedicated to safety of life technology also has other unlicensed participants, and that's where the interference comes from. And so what you're saying is, look, we've got to clarify this. The FCC has to issue safeguards to make sure that those low latency communications get through every single time.
Exactly, and any very small amount of interference will disrupt the V2X communication.
Yeah, you also mentioned regulatory uncertainty. So what has this uncertainty done in your mind and based on your experience meant to deployment of V2X, say over the last decade or so? And then what do you think it means going forward?
You bet. Thank you for that. Unequivocally, regulatory uncertainty has hindered the deployment of V2X technology. For years, the industry was developing the technology based on the assumption that it would be deployed in a protected 75 megahertz band. Then the FCC shrunk the spectrum by 60% and introduced the potential for harmful interference. This created significant regulatory uncertainty and had a severe chilling effect on the industry. At the NTSB, we recognize industry scars from the recent regulatory upheaval, but we cannot let those scars prevent us from realizing the benefits of V2X. The only path that remains is forward. To solve the remaining regulatory uncertainty and achieve widespread deployment, it will require buy-in from automakers and infrastructure owner-operators and coordination amongst various federal agencies such as DOT and FCC. The NTSB believes the DOT at the secretary level is in the best position to coordinate these efforts. Therefore, in the Mount Pleasant report, the NTSB issued a recommendation to the Department of Transportation to implement a plan for nationwide connected vehicle deployment and to solve the outstanding problems such as interference from out-of-band emissions, insufficiency of spectrum for the advanced V2X applications, and division among communication protocols.
In your mind, what needs to happen to encourage or perhaps even incentivize automakers to deploy this technology in their vehicles? Are there any particular government policies, either at the federal or even the state level, that can help support deployment?
Good question. First, the DOT and FCC must provide industry with regulatory certainty that allows for widespread deployment of V2X technology. Regulatory certainty will immediately incentivize stakeholders to increase V2X investment and deployment. I have spoken to automakers and infrastructure owner-operators who remain committed to V2X technology, but instead are on the sidelines due to the volatile regulatory environment. One example, Ford publicly announced plans to deploy V2X in its new vehicles, but said that the deployment was subject to a supportive regulatory framework. I encourage the DOT and FCC to work alongside industry to provide a supportive regulatory framework. Industry must also act. We have seen many pilot deployments on the local level demonstrating the potential safety promise of V2X, but that safety promise cannot be achieved without widespread deployment from automakers. We recognize that there is a first mover disadvantage to be the first automaker to deploy V2X, since the first vehicles equipped with the technology achieve no material safety benefit because they can only talk to each other. The full safety promise of V2X is only realized when we reach a critical mass of vehicles on our roadways. To solve the first mover disadvantage and reach critical mass, I believe automakers and infrastructure owner-operators should work together. A coordinated deployment among automakers and infrastructure owner-operators would achieve a safety benefit on day one. Through attrition, the safety benefit would continue to grow over time. We've seen the automakers coordinate deployment on other safety features such as automatic emergency braking. I believe that agreement could serve as blueprint for widespread V2X deployment. I encourage industry to act.
Well, Board Member Graham, I very much appreciate your being with us today. Your insights and your experience are invaluable. So thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing the other speakers also.
We'll now speak with Robert Hampshire, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at the United States Department of Transportation. He came to the department after serving on the faculty of the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. I'd like to welcome Deputy Assistant Secretary Hampshire. Dr. Hampshire, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Appreciate it. The development of V2X technology has really been, for years now, a public-private partnership with the automotive industry and other sectors engaged with the Department of Transportation, working hand in hand. So why has the US DOT been such an active partner in the development of V2X?
Oh, okay. Thanks, John. That's a great way to start off the conversation. As you may know or may not know, I had the opportunity, during my career as a researcher, to actually conduct vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure research very directly in field testing. So participating in that work, has actually a real honor throughout my career. And I've seen firsthand the benefits of vehicle-to-vehicle communication, or V2X. And, that's something that I take with me in this role. As it relates to the department, we know that safety is the North Star, paramount to our national transportation system. And we, believe, and the department has believed over a long amount of time, that vehicle to infrastructure, V2X technologies, have proven benefits as it relates to crash avoidance, as it relates to particularly vulnerable road users. Maybe we'll come back to that later, reducing traffic congestion and also emissions. So we've seen that and been a funder over a long period of time, but we're at a really precarious time. It's almost a war footing. Last year, we know that almost 43,000 lives were lost during crashes. Not to say anything about the 2.5 million crashes, people injured in crashes. And so this is up 10% over year to date. And particularly, the department, the way we sort of see infrastructure, the way we see technology, particularly as it relates to our national roadway safety strategy, we lay out there, I think, an ambitious goal of 0 roadway fatalities. And so we view all of our innovation and technology work, not all, but in service of that roadway safety strategy. And so vehicle to V2X communication is another way we can move the nation closer towards 0 crashes. And so that's something that we've over the years continue to support and believe, and really we've doubled down, particularly in our national roadway safety strategy, to get us to 0 crashes, or that vision 0.
Right. And it is an ambitious goal and a critically important goal. You mentioned safety in the context of V2X and several use cases. And, you mentioned pedestrians, and I think people have probably heard vehicle to vehicle and maybe vehicle to infrastructure, but it's a broader set of use cases than that. So I want to pick up on that a little bit. There's been a lot of discussion about, how much spectrum is required to support use cases for V2X. And so, let me pick up on this idea of V2P, or V2, vehicle to pedestrian technologies, or also truck platooning technologies, cooperative sensing to support automated driving technologies. I worry that, and I've heard other observers suggest that the recent limitations on spectrum, in other words, decisions by the Federal Communication Commission to reduce the amount of spectrum available for V2X, might jeopardize those types of use cases. Is that a concern of yours? And what do we need to be doing about that? How do we think about prioritization, for example, of use cases given those limitations?
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, I know many of us are working on a daily basis to, really dig into this. Certainly at the department, we've been consistent, and we maintain that, the full 75 megahertz in the 5.9 band, it should have been retained for safety applications in transportation. We still believe that, but with that being said, we're in a world now where we have 30 megahertz in the upper band, and we support the deployment and use of that remaining 30 megahertz for safety, particularly for safety critical transportation applications. So and that's really what we're looking to do, is push and drive deployment in that 30 megahertz, particularly around safety. But as you mentioned, the use cases, we know that they're just fantastically important use cases as well that are non-particularly safety related. Things around cooperative automation. We're moving towards lots of LiDAR data, automation, and other applications that we're going to require quite a bit more bandwidth. So, I know many of your stakeholders, and we've launched our analysis about, what we can do in that 30 megahertz for life critical applications. But, we also are looking at other technologies, other communication technologies for some of the non-critical critical safety of life applications. And so we're kind of taking I call like a both and approach. I want us to deploy, the department or supports deploying in that upper 30 megahertz. We'll do everything in our power to support and enable stakeholders to do that. But also there are other opportunities, communication approaches and other parts of the spectrum that could be really important for some of those other applications.
Yeah. So, I mean, that raises for me, and by the way, I appreciate that. And thank you, because I do believe that there is an important role for US DOT to play with regard to, helping to prioritize or organize, sort of that discussion. But I want to pick up on what you just said about perhaps other areas of the radio spectrum. So, do you think that additional spectrum should ultimately be allocated to V2X technologies? How should we think about this going forward? This, given where we are with regard to spectrum today and what the needs look like they will be in the future.
Yeah, John, this is good. For example, our team is at DOT has been specifically looking at LTE C-V2X, and really trying to assess that technology, particularly for safety of life applications. But many low latency safety applications cannot be performed on non-dedicated spectrum. So we're talking about really those very critical safety applications. I think we really have a pretty high bar to make sure that we can say that they're safe. But like I was saying before, this both and approach, we know that there's other parts of the spectrum that we should leverage. We can certainly advocate be made available, be that other maybe 5G, but other parts of the mid band, but also lower frequencies where appropriate and higher frequencies where appropriate. We know that there's a 5G new radio. We know that there's Bluetooth low energy. We know that there's unlicensed Wi-Fi even for applications. And so that's what when I say the sort of both and approach, really, I think we have a range of other spectrum opportunities. And I think we want to first leverage the 30 megahertz that we have and use it, but then also leverage those other pieces of the spectrum. So, what we've been doing and some of your stakeholders and other stakeholders, both in the private sector and the state and locals, we've been working with the FCC on, and we want to work with you and the stakeholders, particularly at the state and locals who are, thinking about, we'll have to transition to the upper 30 megahertz. We're here to support that, and we're in communication with the FCC actively about that. For those of you who are working on waivers through the FCC process, our office is here to support that process of completing and those waivers where appropriate. We're going to be providing LTE CV2X test results, our own, that we're going to make publicly available. And we invite all of you, the stakeholders, private sector, others, to really increase the evidence base, particularly in LTE CV2X, so we can really learn, have the characteristics and understand, what types of particular applications can be driven through that. So we're here to support. We want to facilitate that information exchange. We want to help you work with the FCC. But John, I do want to just make a plug that the department will be hosting a V2X summit sometime later this year. And so stay tuned there. We really want to bring together your stakeholders, the broader set of stakeholders, to really, one, deal with the issue that we have now in the upper 30 megahertz, but really it's much more forward looking, John, like to really map out, a roadmap together with you all, with industry partners and state locals, about how to do that both and approach that I mentioned.
Yeah, so I like that idea. And I really want to come back to that in a second, and very much appreciate the idea of a summit. While we're on this 30 megahertz that's dedicated to safety of life, V2X deployments, your department is conducting really important studies and analysis of V2X performance, and especially looking at the question of adjacent channel interference, for example, with regard to V2X communication, which could be significantly challenged when we're talking about low latency safety of life communications. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on with those studies, and what you might be learning, and what those studies might be revealing.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So over the last year, like I said, our Spectrum team, has been testing the performance of LTE CV2X radios, both in the lab and closed field testing, and even some small real world, testing. I know many of you, your stakeholders also are deploying and testing, so these tests are coming close to completion, and we're going to make those results available later this summer. But certainly we've learned a lot, and all of us have learned a lot from, say, the DSRC testing and the field operational tests over the years. And so we have a sense of what to look for when it comes to, congestion control, to interference, and to those things. So I think the foundation of the work that's been done in connectivity and connected infrastructure over the last decade are really going to be come in handy to help accelerate the testing and evaluation of where we are now. And John, one of the things I do want to say, we are aware, again, of the industry testing out there, but also as it relates to the performance of the devices, but also adjacent band, potential harmful interference. And so we're aware that, the unlicensed Wi-Fi, particularly in the outdoor context, is something that, found, potential for harmful interference there. So we're replicating those experiments right now, and we'll make those data available. But I can encourage others, private sector partners and state and locals, to, do their own research as well, so we can increase the evidence base for that.
Appreciate that. And I just, as we close, I want to come back to the summit that you mentioned, and maybe just ask this final question. As we talk through this, and we look not only at where we are today, but where we are where we need to be in the future, do you think that the U.S. ought to have a comprehensive national strategy or vision with regard to V2X? And what do you think the key elements of that ought to be?
Yeah. As we continue to, again, we keep going back to roadway, the safety, it's always the North Star. And again, like I said, 43,000 people dying last year. It's just unacceptable. Our national roadway safety strategy is really something I want to keep coming back to as a roadmap of how we're thinking about technology and technology deployment. I think that starts to build a roadmap, or at least starts to build some principles that we can then scaffold a roadmap around. So that's a guiding thing that you ought to look at. Another guiding set of activities as we move towards, a roadmap, certainly the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Right.
There's provisions in there that really, push the department, push all of us as stakeholders to really deliver the world-class transportation system. In particular, there's provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law that really focus on V2X technologies, as well as use cases around vulnerable road users, specifically the use of ITS for to reduce crashes for vulnerable road users are specifically called out. So we have some guidance from the bipartisan infrastructure law. We have guidance from the department's strategic plan, and also the National Roadway Safety Strategy. So all those pieces together, I think, really lay the fabrics for this roadmap that you speak about. But certainly, we've done a survey of, AASHTO and ITS America, and we've collaborated on a survey about what the needs are here for this piece of spectrum and V2X. And so that's really going to guide the input process. So we're getting input from you. Again, we're going to have a summit later this year, input from all of the stakeholders, and then we look forward to working with all of you to put together, what that roadmap will look like.
Well, Dr. Hampshire, thank you so much for being here today. Very much appreciate your perspective and your participation. So thank you.
Thanks, John, and thanks for all those who view this and the stakeholders here. I think you all have, over the years, certainly have a lot of equity here. And again, I'm someone who's worked, hand in hand, someone who's done research and testing on these V2X, and really are willing to work with you to make sure we deliver these benefits for the American people. So thank you. Thanks, John.
Our final two guests run state departments of transportation. Russell McMurray is the commissioner for the Georgia Department of Transportation, our 10th largest state transportation system in the US. He began his career with the department in 1990 as an engineering intern working in construction, and served in a variety of roles prior to being named chief engineer, then being appointed as the department's planning director, and then most recently being appointed as commissioner in 2015. Paul Ajiba is the director of the Michigan Department of Transportation. He has almost 3 decades of experience in the planning, design, and building of major transportation projects in Michigan. Before being appointed by Governor Whitmer as director in January of 2019, he served in the department's metro region and university region. I'd like to welcome Director Ajiba and Commissioner McMurray. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start with the basics. Both of your states have been leaders in deploying V2X technology. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing in your respective states, and what, if anything, you've learned so far through those activities with regard to the potential benefits of this technology.
Well, thank you, John, and thanks for allowing us to join you today. Georgia has really taken a proactive role in deploying V2X technology. And we started several years ago on a pilot project, sort of, proof of concept. And it didn't take long to prove out how important the safety benefits derived from V2X technology are and can be, and ultimately will continue to be going into the future. So we sort of started small, and we've expanded ourselves now to 1,000 units across our state, and even to plan to deploy another maybe 1,700 along our interstate systems throughout Georgia. And so we sort of started small. We've actually got about 700 units out in the field today, broadcasting and receiving messages to vehicles. So, we saw an opportunity to really continue on the safety aspect from signal and phasing and timing type data and also map data But we've expanded that. We've seen some other uses, obviously transit benefit of transit prioritization and optimization. So we've deployed that technology and predominantly in urban areas, right? But also we've had the opportunity to leverage the same technology down with our Port of Savannah, third busiest container port in the nation. And so we really are trying to help freight movement and optimization of freight movement for signal timing and adjustment for optimization of that freight movement, including things like blocked rail crossings where the in-cab notice will tell a driver that the railroad crossing is blocked and that they can take an alternate route. So they're just not sitting idling, which obviously has tremendous environmental benefits as well. So, we started small, we've continued to grow it. We've continued to partner with others. We have another sort of a rural setting on interstate ramps and interstate system over in West Georgia in partnership with the Ray and Kia, where Kia manufacturing, automotive manufacturing facility is, and great partnership with them and deploying technology in their vehicles as well, and testing and piloting that area as well. And so not only an urban setting, but trying to, address rural and freight and all those. So I think we took a few baby steps, but then we sort of pushed in to say we're in due to safety benefits, but also the operational benefits that we can see, the environmental benefits of less stopping and hard braking and hard acceleration and stopping. So starting rather. So, we sort of jumped in and think it's very important. We believe strongly that it has a huge part of our transportation future as well from all the aspects that we'll talk about, I'm sure, a little later in the conversation.
Terrific. Director Ajiba, Michigan has been at this for quite some time as well with regard to V2X deployments. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in Michigan and what you've learned so far.
Yeah, again, thank you, John. And Russell, really honored to be part of this conversation. To echo a lot of the things he said, Michigan's, as you mentioned, has been in the forefront of this because here in Michigan, we don't have a choice. We have a lot of the OEMs here, Ford, Chrysler, Stellantis, GM, Toyota. We have so much coming at us with this new technology. And how do we, as a state DOT infrastructure owners, be a part of it? And we've been in lockstep with them every step of the way. In Michigan, we've passed about 12 to 14 legislation right now when it comes to CAV and V2X technology, because the OEMs are demanding that, right? And if you look nationally, we still don't have one legislation that's dealing with CAV or this new technology that we have. We've deployed over 500 miles of V2X, DSRC technology, 5G, all over the place, right? The biggest initiative we are working on right now is how do we prevent crashes in our work zone. Last year, we had a very unfortunate incident where a drunk driver late at night, we were doing concrete patches out there, got in a closure and took out two very young employees that didn't even see the vehicle coming. These are, I think, the 22, 23-year-old just getting in the industry. So that was very discouraging. So GM approached us about trying this new technology where relay messages to the vehicle, to the driver, where there's presence of workers, and there's a myriad of things in that regard. I don't know if you've seen the numbers lately that the 2021 death on our freeways went way up, and 2021, the 2020 numbers was higher than it's a record. 2021 might even be about 10 to 13% higher. And we have this logo out here that says towards zero death. Do we give up on that logo? We wave the white flag, say, well, we don't think we can ever reach it? Or do we continue to move very aggressively in this arena, looking for how this V2X technology can help us reducing the numbers? And I think that's the challenge for our industry. For me, I think the total zero debt is reachable. Besides this V2X technology, we also just have to decide on taking a proactive engineering approach to solving a lot of these challenges we got ahead of us.
Yeah, I heard both of you talk about several use cases, but in general, those use cases add up to safety, right? Active engagement to save lives, but also I heard use cases associated with efficiency, a more efficient use of transportation infrastructure, as well as efficiency. And so a number of different use cases. I want to come back to something, Director Ajaba, you said a moment ago about, you mentioned legislation or regulation, and I think that's an important factor here we ought to discuss a little bit. The Federal Communications Commission, of course, made a decision in late 2020 to reallocate a significant portion of radio spectrum that was previously allocated for these V2X technologies. And so I wonder, what questions or concerns you might have with regard to that, reallocation. For example, the commission isn't done yet. They need to do additional orders, as I understand, to resolve technical issues with regard to certain technologies to be able to get into the bandwidth that remains. In addition to that, while we're waiting for that to be worked out, you've got entities that want to engage with cellular V2X technology that need to request a waiver, and I'm not aware whether those waivers have even been approved yet. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of those questions and whether they rise to the level of concerns for you with regard to the ability to deploy this technology. And let me start with you. Yes, please.
Absolutely, John. I think being a member of the board of ITS America, we worked extremely hard to convince FCC not to take that spectrum away. The other thing is you have all this that you're not using, then give it away. But I think, again, we have to understand that this technology is still in its infancy, right? It's developing. The eventual goal is to match up to the level 5 autonomous vehicle level. We're not there yet. We're still playing around the level 3, level 4. And by the time we get to level 5, we're going to need all that spectrum space we can get. So in that regard, it was very disappointing. But I think over time, I hope the advocacy group continues to have this conversation with FCC that if the cellular companies end up not using all this, that they return that back. Because as we just said, the numbers are just continuing to climb up. I mean, if you look at all the safety initiatives we've put on our infrastructure in the last 10 years or 20 years, quite frankly, it's amazing. Rumble strips on the shoulder, cable guardrail, and all kinds of stuff just to prevent crashes on our freeway, and the numbers are still going up. So I think the game changer is this technology that we have not fully deployed, but the potential is just great. If only we will be given the opportunity to tap into it.
Commissioner McMurray, your thoughts on the regulatory dynamics here and what's happening with the Federal Communications Commission and the impact in Georgia.
Yeah, John, thanks. That's a big question, and I agree with all of Paul's comments as well. In government, it's often risky for us to venture out and take some risks like the private sector can do in a very private setting. In the public sector, we can't afford to fail because when we do it is publicly, and that's a concern. And just like Michigan and Georgia and a few other states have really taken the lead in trying to deploy V2X technology, initially with DSRC, as everybody knows, and now trying to transition to CV2X, having less spectrum is not good for us. I mean, it is a challenge. I believe in the future of V2X technology is so great, we don't yet understand it fully. As the Internet of Things continues to grow and technology continues to grow, it's not less spectrum you need, it's going to be more. And I really appreciate Paul's comments on maybe if the, other sectors using the spectrum space don't use it, there is affinity for safety. I mean, who cannot get behind and rally behind safety, efficiency, operations, environmental stewardship of all the things that V2X technology brings to the table. I also believe that, the spectrum's been there a long time. It's hard to argue against that. But I think the trajectory of the OEMs and the technology companies that are, deploying all, whether it's DSRC or CV2X, we just really hit our stride. We were about to hit our stride. And this late 2020 decision has really, I think, suspended or greatly slowed down the ability for people to want to continue to move forward because of the unknown part. And John, as you talked about, not only the rules, but the operational part of that, I don't know that we all know quite yet what those limitations or complications may be because of the limited spectrum. So, it's disappointing to us. I mean, we began to transition from DSRC to CV2X, obviously, trying to get through that waiver process and trying to get through that. I mean, we're 9 months in or so. I don't think I may be wrong as of today, but I don't know what we've got. I don't think we've got anything just yet. So that's a long process. We can move through DSRC pretty quick, but everything's pushing to CV2X. So, we always look at the approach to be technology agnostic. We want to provide the roadside units such that you can get that V2X technology, no matter if it's DSRC or CV2X. We're trying to position ourselves that way as well, knowing that ultimately technologies continue to change and evolve. And as an infrastructure owner, we just want to be able to provide the information, so that we can communicate back and forth for all the things that we've enumerated already. So it's a little concerning. I'll be blunt. It's concerning that we're still at this stage, and I have real concerns for you in the automotive industry about how to navigate forward. And as so focused on safety as we all are, I don't want the pursuit of the perfection to be the enemy of the good, right? I mean, there's a lot of goodness that we can already deploy today. And, sort of where we are now, I'm afraid, is seeking the pursuit of perfection.
Yeah, I hear two things in this discussion, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear. One, with regard to the technical aspects of deploying new technology according to the Federal Communications Order. So in other words, a shift from the DSRC technology you mentioned to CV2X. There seems to be an irony in what you're saying, that you want to use the spectrum, you want to deploy the technology, the new technology, to get through these technical questions and to prove out use cases, and yet you aren't, the entities that want to deploy aren't getting the permission pursuant to the order. So that's one thing I've heard. The second thing I heard, and I want to just make sure I understand this, is that less bandwidth equals fewer use cases. Is that what I'm hearing? In other words, to Director Ajiba, you said you connected V2X with deployment of highly automated vehicles. And I think what I heard you say is that with broader bandwidth, you can use this technology to support those deployments and other safety use cases. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, I think Russell said it well as well. This technology is still in its infancy. I think FCC, at least this is my own personal opinion, not ITS America, I'm speaking for now. I think they were too preemptive in taking away some of that spectrum. We tried to make the case that, give it time, with all this safety issues we have out there, we've not even scratched the surface. Again, this is GM approached us about trying to see what they can do to help us have the vehicles communicating with a construction sign out there with codes in the back of this construction sign, working with 3M. And you have a lot of partnership coming together to see how we can deploy this technology in these vehicles to help that driver make informed decisions about what's going on in the construction zone. That's one piece. Again, I mentioned we've done a lot of the rudimentary engineering stuff about how we can reduce crashes on our freeway with rumble strips. The technology is now in the vehicle where when you veer off the road, you hit that pavement marking, your car starts shaking, right? You veer back.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of things that I think over time, as we continue to work on improving the communication between the technology and the infrastructure, we'll see that we're going to be using more and more of this spectrum. Where I'm hoping eventually that if this taken away could be returned if the cellular phone companies do not use them all.
Thank you. As we come to a close here, I want to just, take advantage of your expertise and experience here and ask if you had a specific recommendation for policymakers to advance V2X technology. What advice would you give to policymakers who would want to advance the technology? Commissioner McMurray, let me start with you.
Thank you. First, I would remind everybody that CV2X, the X was for everything. And when you box in with a spectrum, and I like to equate it to a room, if you make a very small room, you can't put everything in it. And just like Paul was talking about, there's so many use cases out here that are yet to be deployed or could be deployed in the future with less spectrum. Then we're just going to be limited. Pardon me for clearing my throat. So as I think about a policymaker, policymakers need to understand the outcomes that they're trying to achieve, such that good policy is written with broad enough clarity that it gives state and private sector entity freedom to innovate, freedom to do their own things to achieve the policy goals that are trying to be set. And when you start limiting those abilities, then you don't have innovation, you don't have creativity, you don't have capital investment, whether it be public or private, to try to again achieve the goal. And our first goal always collectively is safety, right? I mean, that's where we're starting at. So, and as Paul articulated so well, fatality numbers in the nation are going in the wrong direction. So, I would just appeal to those policymakers and decision makers to not limit innovation, the technology, which yields investment, which ultimately gets the policy outcome or safer travel for all modes, for all people, pedestrians alike, not just in the car, but pedestrians, vulnerable users, because the technology, again, to X, allows for that capability and those possibilities moving forward. So, that's, if you think about any good policy, it's not too much and not too little. As somebody told me one time, it's sort of between world peace and a Band-Aid. You got to get it just right. You can't get too prescriptive, and you can't be overly broad, but you need to get just the right mix of the goals you're trying to achieve and allow flexibility, especially the private sector, the ability to innovate, deploy to get those outcomes.
Right. Thank you. Director Ajiba, last thought goes to you. Specific policymaker advice.
I think Russell said it well. As I mentioned earlier in my comment, that here in Michigan, we've got about 12 to 14 legislation now that our legislatures, lawmakers are saying, yeah, go out and try this. We support you. I always believe passing a legislation is support from the political class that, yes, this is the right thing to do. We have a governor that truly encourages us to be in lockstep with the OEMs and also to try things outside the box, be innovative, right? And that's what we've been trying to do. Now we have this cognitive lane that we're exploring a possibility of implementing here in Michigan. We hope that, as Russell said, the X is the vehicle to everything around it, right? how do we make sure that as we continue to work with the OEMs, that some of the issues that we're seeing in the field have been incorporated in that vehicle to continue to strive towards the store zero debt? Because I truly believe we can really get there. It's just going to take time. I think the first step for policymakers is to pass a national law, at least say you recognize that autonomous vehicles are a possibility in the future, right? That's the first step of recognizing that this technology is out there. But how we slowly march to get to level 5 autonomy, I think it's a different debate. But let's at least first acknowledge that this is something that could eventually save a lot of lives.
Right, and connectivity could certainly contribute significantly to that. I want to thank both of you for being here today. It was an incredibly enlightening conversation. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having us. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to our panelists for an enlightening, stimulating, and essential conversation as we work to make our roadways even safer and more efficient for all users. For everyone else, we appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to check out our new V2X policy agenda on our website, www.autosinnovate.org/V2X. And remember to like and follow Alliance for Automotive Innovation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks.